are going to talk about multiplying integers. So make sure you have your notes out and write down everything I write down. And then at the end, you will do your practice problems on your own. So first we're going to review the term product. So remember, product is, there it is, the answer to a multiplication problem. So when we're talking about integers and multiplying them, we come up with the word product a lot. So when we talk about multiplying integers, we're talking about multiplying two numbers together. So when we have the same sign, we say that the product of two integers with the same sign is positive. So, for example, what we're talking about is positive and negative numbers. So, for example, if we have a number like 2 times 3, now remember the dot is another way of writing it, multiplication. So we have two positives stays a positive, so we get positive 6 as our answer. We could also do this with negatives. So if you have a negative 4 times a negative 3, you can see those both have the same sign, so our answer is positive. So we get a positive 12. And another way you can see is parentheses. It's also a way of showing multiplication. So again, two positives equal a positive, two negatives equal a positive. So that's one of our ways. Now we also have one with a different sign. So different signs. So the product of two integers with different signs is always negative. So it always has a negative. Bear with me in my spelling. So, for example, if we have 8 times a negative 5, so you can see you have a positive and a negative, again this is a dot, then you're always going to get a negative answer. All right. Now, we also talk about a few properties in this lesson, and you need to know these properties. They're in your things, but just as good general knowledge. So first we have a multiplication property of 0. And what this is saying is the product of a number. There you go. I'm just going to use my hashtag for number and 0. And I put a line through my 0 so you know it's a 0, not an O. Is 0. So I think pretty much we know this, but this is a property. So anything times 0 is 0. If I have negative 36 and I multiply it by 0, your answer is 0. If I have a number like 147,832 and you multiply it by 0, oh, forgot my slashes, my answer is always 0. So our other one is the identity property of multiplication. Now, if you're in my class, I kind of had a trick, and I talk about my identity doesn't change, and that's what the identity property is. So here you say the product of a number and 1, which 1 is called the multiplicative property. Multiplicative property is the number. So, again, if you multiply anything by 1, that number stays the same, is ultimately what it's saying. But I think of it as it keeps its identity. So, for example, 18 times 1 equals 18, right? negative 36 times 1 equals negative 36. Now they do these in algebra terms, and if you were to do it, write it as algebra terms, for our first one, the multiplication property of 0, in algebra, they use letters. So for here, if I said A times 0, well, it always equals 0. And A represents any number, or any integer. And our identity property, same thing. A times 1 always equals A. So number times 1 is always equals that same number. So let's do a few examples. And then I'll set you off on your own. Stop. All right, so here's an example. A hiker descends from a mountain peak. If the hiker descends at a rate of 800 feet every half hour, what's the hiker's elevation relative to the peak after 3 hours? Use the formula D equals R times T. So remember, when you have two letters next to each other, that also means multiplication. So here, D represents distance, R equals rate, and T equals time. Now on here, there's an important word right here, and it's descends. All right, it's in here twice. So descends means to go down. So if we're writing this and going down, that would be like a negative number. So we represent that as a negative 800 feet. So all I do now is figure out, well, D is what we're trying to find, the distance. So I put D equals, and then I plug in. So my rate is, in this case, a negative 800 feet. And my time, then, is 3 hours. And I just plug this in. So I say negative 800 times 3. And I do that, and I get a negative 2,400 feet. So that's a descension of 2,400 feet. So it descends that much. So that's an example of a problem you'll have as your homework, as a little real life example. And then let's just review some of these real quick. So we have a negative 2 times 12. Well, your signs are different, so you have a negative 24. Here, negative 1 times 4. Again, signs are different. Negative 4, but this is also a property. And this is your multiplicative property of identity. So I'm just going to put identity property of multiplication. Okay? Identity prop of multiplication. 7 times 0. Well, anything times 0 is 0, right? And this one is our property of 0. Technically, it's your multiplicative property of 0. Sorry, this pen is really fat. It's not looking well. But then now here you have negative 6 times negative 11. Well, you have two of the same sign, so it's a positive 66. Ooh, here it gets tricky. So you have negative 1 times negative 12. Those are the same, so you get a positive 12 because of its identity property. And then you say positive 12 times a negative 9, and that gives you negative 108 because your signs are different. And lastly, what we need to do is we're going to plug in numbers that are represented by letters. So it says evaluate the expression when A equals 3, B equals negative 4, and C equals negative 8. So what you'll be doing is substituting those in. So wherever you see A, you'll plug in 3. So when I say 3, remember, letters next to each other, it means you multiply. So 3 times C is negative 8. Then you minus your negative 4. All right? So first, we're going to say 3 times negative 8. It's different signs. Negative 24. And then you bring down what you haven't used. Minus a negative 4. Well, in my class, we bam, 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 add the opposite. And you have negative 24 plus 4 is a negative 20. Box your answer. All right, A, we have 3 times C, -8 plus -4. So very similar here, -24 plus -4, -28. Because those signs are the same, take the sum. All right, we're going to switch colors just to switch it up some. So our next one, A squared. So you say 3 squared plus B, which is -4, times C, which is -8. So order of operations knows that we have to take our exponents first. So 3 times 3 is 9, plus -4 times -8. Well, now we have to multiply. So now we bring down our 9 plus same sign. They're both the same sign, so it's a positive 32. 9 plus 32 is 41. Box your answer. And our last one. So A is 3 times -4 minus C, -8 squared. So this is important. Make sure you're squaring both your -8s. So a negative times a negative is a positive. So this is, you're going to say 3 times -4 minus, well, this now becomes a positive 64, right? Now, you have different signs. -12 minus 64. We don't subtract in my class. We bam, bam. -12 plus -64 equals -76. There you are. So now you need to do some practice problems, and we'll see you tomorrow.